Hi everyone, this is Charlize from Forward Chess, and today we're going to talk about the most important theoretical endgame concept that beginners, well actually all chess players should know, and that is opposition. As you all know, endgames are probably the most important phase of the game to learn. They are pretty tough. Just because there are fewer pieces doesn't make it easier. In fact, it makes it a little bit more difficult. You have less to work with, but chess also becomes more about the squares and controlling them. There are a lot of theoretical endgames to learn in chess, but the one we are looking at today is considered to be the most foundational one, which means if you understand it well, then other endgames will become a little bit more easier to do as well. So let's take a look. Here we only have the kings on the board and one pawn. So white's plan is to get this pawn to the other side to promote, get a queen, and win the game. Black will try to stop that from happening with their king, and our king is going to be doing most of the heavy lifting and guiding the pawn. That's the first thing to understand about this endgame. It's not you pushing your pawn, it's your king guiding the way, controlling the squares for your pawn. So the first rule we are going to memorize, remember, is that the king has to stay in front of the pawn at all times. This might change when you get to the end, of course. As your pawn gets closer to the promotion square, you want your pawn to go ahead and lead the way. But to get there, your king needs to guide the pawn. So this opposition endgame is not your pawn versus your opponent's king, it's your king versus your opponent's king. And first rule, king stays in front of the pawn. Not behind, not next to. Your king's guiding the way, so you go ahead and stay in front of the pawn. We are going to bring this king out. Black will probably bring their king forward as well. Of course, black's king will try to stay in front of us, stay in front of the pawn, and we will just go ahead and move in front of the pawn. Black's king comes closer, and here the very first time we're seeing this idea of opposition. Opposition is when the two kings are head to head looking at each other, but there is one square in between them. You get distant opposition with an odd number of squares in between them, but our focus right now is this concept of normal, your regular old school opposition. Now, why opposition is important is because we are controlling squares. So let's take a look. These three squares are now under our king's control. The black king cannot move to either of these squares, therefore the black king cannot come closer to our pawn because our king is controlling it. Right, so black will then move the king either back or to the side. If the king goes back, we will keep continuing with opposition. But let's take a look at what happens when the king moves to the side. Now, our opposition, we only wanted it on the file that the pawn is on, not next to. You don't have to keep going into opposition. If we do that, then the kings will just be dancing around and we're not going to get anywhere. Instead, after opposition, when your opponent's king moves out of the way, we do what's called outflanking, and that's rule number 2. After opposition, your king outflanks your opponent's king. The idea of a flank is quite a common term in sports. If you think about rugby, soccer, this is the side of the board. And we are going to the side. Notice we are going ahead to the side. We didn't move to f4 because we want to control as many squares as possible for the pawn to go to. Right now, our king is controlling these 3 squares. We are stopping the black king from moving to them, and we are opening up space for our king and our pawn to move. So opposition followed by outflanking. King stays in front of the pawn. Right, now let's look at what happens if the king comes down. Now it may look like black has taken opposition, But in this case, we can take it back or claim it back, and do that by moving the pawn up. Now notice the pawn is still behind the king, but you don't want to leave your pawn behind for too long. It needs to join the party at some point. So our pawn comes up, e4 check, the black king moves. Now I'm not going to move my pawn again. We'll see what happens when we do that later. But I am going to take opposition again. And I'm forcing the black king to move. And now I can bring my pawn up because it is still behind the king. And I am taking away this d6 square for the black king. Now let's say the black king goes to e8. This should look like a common position. You should notice the alarm bell should be ringing because we take opposition. Opposition, if I'm taking opposition, by the way, it means I'm moving into opposition and you have to move out. So as white, we always want to take opposition. King moves and now we outflank, right? And as you can see, our king is on the dream square. We are controlling all three squares for our pawn to go to, and black has no way of stopping the promotion. We will just go ahead and get a queen. All right, and this is a checkmate we should also know how to do, but we'll have a video on this later. Right, let's go back. Let's look at what happens if we break the rule and move our pawn next to our king. Such as in this case, we can play e5, check. Now this looks like a nice move, you know, using your pawn, getting a little bit closer to the promotion square. But the problem is, after king e7, now our king doesn't have any space. It can't go forward. All we can really do is move our pawn, and this is going to be a draw. Let's have a look. The black king will stay in front of the pawn. Our king will come up, and black will take opposition. We don't have much to do here. After pushing the pawn, this is the position that we will ultimately end up with, and this is stalemate, which of course we don't want. So remember, keep your king in front of the pawn, keep taking opposition, and then outflanking. Let's go to our starting position. Take a look at this again. So we brought our king up, black brought his king down, we keep going ahead, and then we take that opposition. Right, so remember last time the king moved out and then we outflanked. Let's say instead the king moves back. Well, I'm going to keep taking opposition. King moves back, I'm going to keep taking opposition. Of course, you want to start bringing your pawn up as well. In this case, I'll play e4. Oh no, is black taking opposition? Well, yes, but I can take it back. And there we have our winning position once again, moving out of the way and getting our pawn to the other side. So, general rules to remember: keep the king ahead of the pawn. Number 2, take opposition when you can. Number 3, follow it up by outflanking. And this way you'll push your pawn to the edge of the board and get a queen and get a win. As I mentioned, we were just looking at the book Chess Endings for Beginners. This is a new release. Currently it's on a new release sale. Otherwise the regular price is $7.99. You can find it on Forward Chess, and it's a really good book to test out all of your endgame knowledge. Let's take a look. This is what the book looks like in the Forward Chess Reader. And what you have are a lot of pawn endings, positions that basically every player should know. It's a good place to test yourself, good place to just brush up on theory if you've seen this before, but it's somewhere stored in your brain from very, very long ago. This is a really good place to test that out. We have pawn endgames, and then we've got some other positions that are also important to know, such as, you know, checkmate with the king, queen, king, rook, king and 2 rooks. Because when you promote, you also need to know how to finish the game. So this is a great place to test it out as well. But we focus on the pawn endings for now, showing how you win with having the extra pawn and getting to promote. Next time, we'll look at how you defend these kinds of positions. So keep a lookout for that. And that's it. I will see you next time looking at how black defends this kind of opposition position if it is allowed.